Hello again, people. As serious as some of my topics have been, and as seriously as I take my job helping you, today I'd like to take a sidestep and talk about a skill we can all practice. A positive skill, and a skill that can give us quite a bit more freedom from our thoughts. Let's focus on this positive and get some relief, shall we? I'm going to talk about perspective taking. Perspective taking involves a few steps. And once you're in the habit of it, it can be a great way to both contextualize and set our thoughts on a more positive, objective path. I'm talking about taking perspective of ourselves, which builds on the fundamental self-esteem concept that we are all born valuable. In CBT, we talk about the thinking errors, extremes, catastrophizing, minimizing, rationalizing, all of these things. A lot of my clients can lump themselves into small categories based on their negative self-talk. This limits their capacity to realize their dreams, pursue their talents, and be kinder to themselves. I understand where they're coming from. I'm not always so kind to myself either. Perspective taking helps us to take different looks at ourselves from different angles. I use analogies here, as I'm fond of doing. Negative perspectives of ourselves lead us to negative self-talk, negative emotions, and negative self-fulfilling behaviors. I talked about this in my initial CBT videos, so if you haven't seen them yet, I highly recommend them as a great primer for what I'm talking about now. It's true that once we're locked into negative cycles, it's difficult for us to understand how this became a pattern. Why should we be so hard on ourselves if there is another option? Perspective taking just means that either on our own or with the help of a therapist, we take some steps back and look at ourselves, others, situations, or the world in different ways and different angles. Kicking this off requires some background. Perspective taking is useful as a tool against negative self-talk. Negative self-talk comes from our beliefs about ourselves, which turn into thoughts. Then we talk to ourselves, sometimes out loud. Negative self-talk includes using extremes against yourself, such as, "You're not good enough. You're not a good employee, kid, or parent. You're a terrible artist, writer, etc." Notice that some of these statements seem very harsh. In turn, when we're harsh on ourselves, we can be harsh to other people. We can be prone to added stress, anxiety, and depression. Well, let's try something out here. What was the last negative thing you said to yourself? Do you truly believe that statement? We'll come back to that at the end. Now to our perspective-taking exercises. Let's try out 3. First is the third person test. If someone else were to tell the story of whatever is going on in your life right now, listening to your negative self-talk, would they say the same things about you? It depends, right? I want you to pick someone who would tell the story about you that you trust, whether they're alive, dead, or fictional. When you're saying unkind things to yourself, they are there to tell a different story, to say kind things, and to reassure you. Remember when I talked about the ghosts analogy in my earlier video and how they can speak to us as well? Ghosts don't get a say in this conversation, okay? Only positive, trustworthy people. What would they say about you? That's one perspective. Next, I'd like you to take you to a mountaintop. Pick any mountain you wish, as long as it's comfortable and the view is clear. You have a pair of binoculars or a telescope to see in all directions. It has very powerful magnification. Now you're on the mountaintop and you can see in all directions. Let's pretend you see the things happening in other people's lives around the world as well. Now, peep through the lens and find yourself. Then pull back and look at others. Get in close. Are they experiencing something similar? What are they telling themselves? How do they respond to self-criticism? If you want, pretend you're looking at the same trustworthy person through the lens. How do they handle their negative thoughts? Now we have a mountaintop tool to use. We see that others are often going through the same things. We can see how they respond. Perhaps we don't feel as alone in our frustration, fear, or sadness. Perhaps we see other things taking place that demonstrate to us that people everywhere are suffering, coping, and adjusting. They are human just like us, and we can all be kind to ourselves. Final analogy, I call this tunnel vision or the hyperfocus effect. Lock your fingers together and make a rooftop out of your hands. Now flatten them out to make some solid piece. Pull your hands up to your eyes and cover them with your hands. What do you see? Only things that at the edges of your hands envision, right? This is a hyperfocus. You're so zoomed in on your hands that you can't see much around them. Now slowly start pulling your hands away from your eyes, noticing how what you see changes. Take your hands all the way to the end of your reach. Now you see your hands and everything else. Your hands aren't a large object blocking your sight anymore, are they? This is also another way to look at our self-talk and our problems. We are so zoomed in on them that often we can't see anything else. Have you ever been working on something and the harder you work on it, the more tired and stressed out you become to the point where you aren't making any progress on it? It's like that sometimes with me. The best thing I can do is take my attention off of it for a few minutes, sometimes days, and I can come back and try again. Usually after I've taken a break from it, I can rest and start fresh. I find it very helpful too when I've lost something in the ground or a mess of grass or something. I've spent tons of time looking for things, getting frustrated and wanting to give up. I take a break, then come back. Often I find what I was looking for. That's a hyper-focus trick as well. Ever drop something really small on your floor that's the same color? A contact, a pin? I get down on the floor and put my head down sideways. I usually find it pretty quickly. There's some bonus perspective taking ideas for you. I use these exercises with my clients in therapy. Perspective taking is quite relieving, yet we often forget to do it when we're anxious or depressed. We forget to do it when we're having an argument or a bad day. These tools are here for you to use for any negative self-talk or situation you may be having. I'm not going to promise you that it will solve the underlying issues, though it could help. Now remember negative statements I asked you about earlier? Try out some of these perspective taking tools on that. What did you discover? Do you feel better or are you less stressed about it now? Can you come up with some reassuring things to say to yourself? Some kind things? Anything more balanced? You can also try the flipping the coin technique or the best case scenario. If we use so much energy on the negative, surely we can train ourselves to gain perspective on it and where it comes from. Try some of these out and let me know your results in the comments, if you would be so kind. As always, your ideas, comments, and subscribes are always welcome. We're closing in on 800 views, so I hope you watching this all the way through was beneficial. I appreciate your support. Next week, I'm going to dive into some substance use topics which are near and dear to me. Join me then.
I know you was a fan of mine. Here's my card on the back, and there's my fan club pictures. I know you was a fan of mine. I know you was a fan of mine. I know you was a fan of mine. Here's my card on